welcome to Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. I'm Will, and I'm here today with the inimitable Ric Meyers. Thank you for joining us. Was that a good one?
Inimitable.
Yeah,
Inimitable. I'm gonna have to look that up.
I like that word. So I have two little. I mean, you're an author. You've written nonfiction books about movies. You've written novels. You worked in comic books. You've advised studios on movies. Is that also true?
Yep.
So I have two little pieces of information that I thought would be fun to give as like an intro for you, and then we could get into the interview. So the first one is this is just something I stole from your Wikipedia to give context for people watching. One of the men most responsible for the acceptance of Asian action movies and stars in America.
That's what I've been told.
So, I mean, and that pretty much says it all. The second little piece of information here is, to me, like probably the coolest thing in the world. So you have to confirm for me that this is true. You hung out with John Woo the day before A Better Tomorrow came out. Is that true?
Yeah.
It's just like, I don't think I'll ever do anything that cool.
In Hong Kong. In Hong Kong.
That's amazing. And were there posters for that movie just like everywhere? Was there like...
No. What was hilarious, of course, is John Woo at that time was considered king of the bombs. I mean, he hadn't made a wildly successful movie yet. And the posters for the original A Better Tomorrow, I wish we were on my iPhone or my iPad, because I could come show you the poster of A Better Tomorrow, which he signed for me that day.
Oh, wow.
And it looked like a drama about teachers. It didn't look like an action thriller in any way. None of the posters did. And so at that time, I was at Choi Hark's company. Choi Hark was producing Cinema City. They were producing the film. So he said, yeah, this movie's coming out tomorrow. Would you like to, meet the director? Oh yeah, I'd love to meet the director. This is John Woo. Didn't know who he was. Okay. I hadn't seen his other films. And that night, one of the guys from the office said, let's go see the movie. And we tried to get tickets to that movie all night. We finally was able to go to a showing on the other side of Hong Kong Island, the latest show. And the guy I was with said, I have never seen a Hong Kong audience react this way. So we all knew that the game had been changed. I mean, I came there as a Jackie Chan fan and as a Hong Kong cinema fan, but Kung Fu. This was Gun Fu. And they had not done that before. And the audience went insane. It was an amazing, it was one of the great experiences I've had in the cinema.
Were the people in the audience watching the movie were just going nuts while the movie was
absolutely nuts. And again, the guy from the Cinema City office was going, Hong Kong audiences do not react this way. I'd seen a bunch of Kung Fu movies in Hong Kong prior to that. And again, yeah, they were used to Kung Fu. They were used to wuxia movies. And so they all were, okay, yeah, we're used to this. But this is something they had never seen before.
That's amazing.
I mean, they had sword movies, wuxia sword movies, flying swordsman films, but they were so used to that.
Not someone flying around with guns.
Oh yeah, these guys were leaping around with guns.
Amazing.
That was one of many amazing experiences I had in Hong Kong while I was working on my first book on martial art movies, and it led to all these other things. Anyway.
So that's incredible. Yeah. And actually I have one of your books here.
That's the latest one. That's the one I'm happiest with because it's just about Kung Fu. The other ones were martial arts and samurai and ninja. And that's the first one that I did that was just Kung Fu. And that was written because a German company got in touch with me and asked me to do a documentary, which is Films of Fury, the Kung Fu movie, which is still on Amazon Prime.
Okay.
And so I wrote the book as something to do the documentary from. So to my mind, I prefer the book to the documentary.
There's just so much more information in the book.
Yeah, it's the 6-hour version of the doc. Yeah. And also, I was working on the documentary with a producer who really didn't want Kung Fu. He wanted martial arts. He wanted an R-rated documentary. Okay. And I'm going, this is Kung Fu, but he kept on putting in blood. He kept on putting in swearing. He kept on putting in nudity every chance he got. And he also didn't let us, me or the directors, go to Hong Kong to interview people. He put in animation instead, and I
I
love animation,
yeah.
but then he didn't get a really great, no offense to the animator. God bless you, buddy. But I'm a big fan of animation too. All the consulting I've done for movies have been on animated movies. There are animated movies with Kung Fu in them, Kung Fu Panda, Raya and the Last Dragon coming from Disney, and Minions, The Rise of Gru, which is coming from Universal. They all have Kung Fu in it. So I love animation. So the fact that the producer said, we're going to put animation in your movie, I was going, oh, that's great, that's great. And then I saw the animation, I went, I said, we could have done better.
Yeah.
We could have done better. Because I said, you handle the animation. I won't tell you how to do the animation, but leave it up to your animator. But the animator, if you've seen the movie,
Yeah, I have. Yep.
it ain't primal. It ain't Samurai.
Well, it's also interesting that you say that they wanted like an R-rated documentary with all the nudity and the swearing, but the animation is kind of child, like not that it's as was done by a child, but it looks like a kid's TV show.
I really never got the full story of why he decided. I was at the San Diego Comic-Con doing my Kung Fu extravaganza in 2008 when I got the phone call to him because me and the directors were ready to go to Hong Kong. He said, animation will cost more than sending you to Hong Kong, but I really think we should do animation. And I'm just thunderstruck because I already set up all these interviews.
Oh, wow. Okay.
With Jackie and all these other people. I wanted to finally talk to La Kal Yung, the director of 36 Chamber of Shaolin, the guy who I think is the best Kung Fu filmmaker of all time and ever will be. And of course, now it's too late. He died. So, whenever I love Films of Fury, Kung Fu movie, I love the book, but I can't look at the movie without thinking
what it could have been.
What it could have been.
Yeah. So that the book is actually kind of like what I used as my guide to write down my questions for you today. And hopefully like a combination of your personal experiences and also picking your brain on all the amazing knowledge that you have. I'm going to get in there through the computer.
Look at my brain.
So
pick my nose.
When did you first go to Hong Kong?
Well, I'd been a writer of thrillers. I mean, let's start. I started in comic books.
Okay.
I was hired by the wonderful Jeff Rovin at the age of 20 to be the assistant editor of the Atlas Comics Seaboard periodical line.
Oh, wow.
And this was my very first professional paying job. I created and wrote Target, which became Target Manstock. And funnily enough, we've come full circle because Paramount Pictures bought the rights to all those characters, but because of COVID and other things, they haven't gone out. So Jeff and the new publisher, Jason Goodman, said, let's bring it, let's create our own new Atlas. So now we have Atlas Originals presents the novel version of Target.
Ooh, okay.
I wrote this year, and I brought it up to date. And we're putting out Thrilling Adventure Tales, which is going to have all three of the books that we've created this year. So in any case, so I'm working in comic books. Then I start working in nonfiction books. And then I start working in novels. And that I wrote a book on science fiction films and fantasy films, which led me to being an assistant editor at Starlog magazine. And Starlog sent me to England a couple of times to be on the sets of all sorts of movies, but the one that I spent the most time on was Superman, the Christopher Reeve, Richard Donner Superman. And that was an amazing, I spent a month on that. And I come back and I go to the premiere of the movie. And when I was on the set of Superman, Peter Boyle played Lex Luthor's henchman, not what's his name? Otis, who played Otis in Ned Beatty.
Okay.
Ned Beatty wasn't in the movie that I saw being filmed. It was Peter Boyle from Young Frankenstein. So then Ned Beatty shows up and he's playing a jerk. He's playing an idiot. And that upset me because I had been waiting for someone to take comic books seriously in American film. And while Superman was a pretty darn good movie, it had that one flaw of that character who wouldn't exist. So I'm at the offices of Larry Hama, the creator of the G.I. Joe line, and complaining that, why do they always ruin it? Why can't they do superheroes straight? And Larry took me that very day. He took me down to see my first samurai movie, which was Baby Cart in the Land of Demons, which is still my favorite, and Drunken Master, Drunken Monkey in a Tiger's Eye, in Chinatown, New York.
Oh,
And
wow.
my mind was just blown. This was 1978, I think, which is when I think Superman came out, or 79. But I saw it down in Chinatown, New York. I went right to my publisher the very next day, who were right in New York, and I said, I want to do a book about these movies. And they went, here's $750. Go ahead.
Okay.
Then I found, at that time, great Shaw Brothers movies were being shown on television in America as part of something called Black Belt Theater, or in the New York area, drive-in movie. It was a syndicated package of Shaw Brothers movies, edited, panned, and scanned, and put on a variety of independent television stations in America. Turns out, World Northall, which was the company who did that, had their offices directly across the street from Grand Central Station. And I would come in from my home in Connecticut to Grand Central Station. And I did the exact same thing. I got my job at Starlaw because I walked into the office and said, I want to help you.
Yeah.
So I walk into them and say, I want to write a book on these movies. And they just you could hear the church bells going. They fell to their knees. They were just worshiping or kissing my ring, which I didn't have. They said, anything you want, anything we can do for you, we will do for you. And I said, send me to Hong Kong. And they said, let's see what we can do about that. Meanwhile, I'm doing my research, and it turns out there's this little company in California who want to also educate America on Hong Kong films because they were putting out VHS tapes of the great Jackie Chan, Golden Harvest, Kung Fu movies. And when I got in touch with them, they were called Ocean Shores. The same thing happened. They went, what timing? They just said, anything you want. And I said, send me to Hong Kong. And they
Did you
didn't
make
go
them
like
kiss
this.
your ring?
No, I by then I had bought a ring so they could have
Okay.
kissed it, but they were in California, so we couldn't do that.
Long distance kissing, yeah.
Yeah, long distance kissing. So what happened was, when I said send me to Hong Kong, they said, when? How soon? Let's go.
Oh, that's
They said,
amazing.
not only, Ocean Shores was run in Hong Kong by a guy named Jackson Hung, who knew everybody because he was trying to break these movies out in America. He couldn't get the rights to the Shaw Brothers stuff, but he could get the rights to the Jackie Chan stuff and all these independent ones, so many independent ones. So he knew everybody. Jackson introduced me to all these actors and all these stars from Shaw Brothers. He got me on the Shaw Brothers lot. And he arranged a meeting with Jackie. So this was 1978, 79.
So
I'm walking through the hallways of Shaw Brothers, which was this little tiny studio on the side of a mountain. I mean, it was almost like a subterranean villain's lair. It wasn't this grand.
Incredible.
Shaw Brothers was a grand, beautiful studio. Golden Harvest was just like a bunch of rabbit warrens. So I'm going through these really super narrow hallways, and coming around the corner is Yun Biao.
Oh, wow.
And I go,
Yeah.
whoa! I became known as Mo Guilo, which means hairy foreign devil, because I was basically, most Americans treated all their Kung Fu films like crap. When I was at Jackie Chan's birthday party, I think his 32nd birthday party in Hong Kong, when we were doing the documentary on him, I introduced Jackie Chan to Jonathan Ross and Jonathan Ross to Jackie Chan.
Oh, is it the Incredibly Strange
Film show? I was involved in the first season on that for Herschel, because I also wrote a book called The World of Exploitation Films, for 1 week only, The World of Exploitation Films. So I worked on the Herschel Gordon Lewis episode of the first season of Incredibly Strange Film Show. And he said, what should we do? And I said, you should do Jackie Chan.
Yes, you have to. Yeah.
And he had never heard of him. They had never seen him. It was that documentary which really broke Jackie out in America. So they brought me back to Hong Kong at that point. But anyway, I'm ahead of myself. But up until then, all the Hong Kong guys were treated like crap by Americans. They said, this is junk. You're putting out junk. And what I was going to say at Jackie's birthday party, one of the stars of Above the Law, the Yuen Biao movie, look, the guy who played the villain, the one who killed Cynthia Rothrock in the film in one of the many cuts.
Oh, is Melvin Wong? Is that?
Yeah, Melvin Wong.
Yeah.
He looked at me and went, you like this stuff? And I'm going, yeah, I love this stuff. They thought they were lower than, Roy Rogers Westerns. They thought they were doing, crap for people who didn't care enough. And I'm going, so in any case. So that was the first time I went to Hong Kong at the behest of Ocean Shores, introduced me to Wang Lung Wai, introduced me to Jackie. I wrote the book. The book sold extremely well. And by then I was ahead of the curve. In the future, because I opened the floodgates with this book and the other things I did, the consulting and the documentary, the Incredibly Strange Film Show, people started learning about it. And later on, people would spit on me saying, you didn't do a very good job. You could have done a lot better. You didn't have enough information. I'm going, I told you what I was told.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, so now everybody knows everything. And yeah, and I see my own mistakes and I sort of like, oh, well, I did the best I could at the time. But at this point, again, you live long enough, you do enough work, because I didn't let anybody stop me. No matter what anybody said about me or thought about me, I didn't care. I did this because I love these movies. And I wanted to share my love. That's been my entire career, sharing my love of stuff with people. And it also led to me, I realized that I was like a Chinese writer who fell in love with baseball movies, not baseball, baseball movies. So he wrote books about baseball movies. And he said, it's really fun. They run around and they swing bats and they catch balls. But it's pretty clear that he didn't know the rules of baseball. And I felt it was pretty clear on my part that I didn't know the rules of Kung Fu. I tried to find out the rules of Kung Fu, but all I could find in America was martial arts. To me, that wasn't Kung Fu. That wasn't Lau Kar-leung. That wasn't Jackie Chan. That was Bruce Lee. Punchy, 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 punchy. And I saw a lot of this going down, a lot of, beautiful stuff. And so that's what I had to find out. So I started learning Kung Fu, and that has led to many more things. So now you've learned an important lesson, if your audience hasn't. It's not getting me to talk. It's getting me to shut up.
Now, this works well for me.
Stop there and let you ask another question.
Okay.
Then go on for another 3 hours.
So one of the things that I thought was really interesting, and this is something that you just spoke about your book and other stuff that I've read that you've written, is the kind of the internal and external applications of Kung Fu. And the internal stuff, especially like a concerted effort towards a goal.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a sentence in your book where it's not about winning or losing a fight. It's do you learn or do you not learn?
Not about win or lose. It's about learn or not learn.
Right. Yeah. And so much of that makes me think of like screenwriting 101, of like you are on a path towards a goal and you're trying to learn or you don't learn, and that affects your arc. And I mean, it just seems like Kung Fu is so perfectly suited to the form of cinema.
Well, if you saw the documentary, we defined, this is the one thing I love the most about the documentary. We defined the word Kung Fu, which does not mean martial arts. Wushu means martial arts. Wuxia means flying chivalry. But Kung Fu, we defined as, you just used Jet Li's definition, concerted effort toward a goal. We decided, just like in the movie Hero, one of Jet Li's greatest ones, where they define sword 19 different ways. You can define the word Kung Fu many different ways. The way we defined it was human achievement. That's not fighting. That's achievement. As I love interviewing Jet Li. Jet Li is, he's really got it. Jackie, I love Jackie too. He's a kung fu savant. He gets a little bit of everything from everyone, which is what Bruce Lee told you to do. Learn everything from everyone and everything, then make it your own. And that's the one thing that people don't do.
Yeah.
The life of Brian him. In other words, he says, make it your own. And they go, yes, we will copy you.
Yeah, we'll do what you tell. Yeah.
We will freeze you in aspic for all eternity. While Jet Li moves on. He's balanced. He's yin. That's the other thing. Kung Fu is not or. Kung Fu is and. It is not mind or body. It's mind and body. It's not internal or external. It's internal and external. It's everything. So that's the big difference. So yes, if you want to be a screenwriter, be a great Kung Fu screenwriter, be a great writer, a great Kung Fu screenwriter. In other words, your Kung Fu and screenwriting should be great. That's the other thing that I tell people all the time, which is, what's my favorite movie? Great. What's my favorite kind of movie? Great. What's my favorite kind of food? Great. I've had terrible Chinese food. I've had great Chinese food. I prefer great. So that's what human achievement is. You want to achieve. Humans are incredibly capable. Albert Einstein, Michael Jordan, we can all do that. That's Kung Fu. You just want to be the best you can be. And Kung Fu allows you to open those channels. I have learned so much is possible with true Kung Fu, with elevated Kung Fu, with internally based, externally manifested Kung Fu. But don't hurt yourself, because you don't have to. Kung Fu, open hand, open heart, open mind. And then you will be incredibly powerful. If you use your muscles, not so much. If you use your fist, you're going to hurt yourself. That ain't Kung Fu, baby.
So
it's not my Kung Fu.
Excuse me. It seems like there's been a big struggle throughout the history of these movies of trying to find the balance between showing the internal and external aspects. Well, and of course, obviously, there are movies that don't show the internal aspects at all.
Most don't show.
But the thing that one of the things I thought was so fascinating about both the documentary and the book was and I wrote this guy's name down because I knew I wouldn't remember it. Because I have so many names in my head right now. Kwan Tak Hing, those Wong Fei Hung movies. Yeah. How important were those movies to the development of Kung Fu cinema?
Well, if you look at the history of Hong Kong cinema, it starts with an open mind, and then slowly it becomes closed. Well, actually, not that slowly. At the beginning of Hong Kong cinema, the women did everything, because according to Hong Kong people at the time, movies were for women and children. They weren't for men. They weren't for adult men. Adult men had to go out and make a living and make money and survive. And I understand that. So all the women starred as the actors, and also the Kung Fu was not derived from Japanese samurai stuff. All the other martial arts is just about fighting. Mm-hmm. And while Kung Fu was about human achievement, was about learning, was about healing, was about getting better. So this character was created. I don't know if you've read any of Chinese wuxia novels, which are extremely long and convoluted and fascinated. That's the other thing that I talk about now. Wuxia, which is Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, those kind of movies, those were the Marvel and DC cinematic universes of China and Hong Kong. All of these guys had individual names like Flying Cloud, and stuff like that, individual clothing, costumes, individual weapons, and they were flying swordsmen. It was truly, long before DC and Marvel did it, a comic book universe, because it took place in Jianghu, which is translated as the martial art world.
So it's like an alternate reality?
It was an alternate reality, just like the reality of Spider-Man and Superman and all the rest of them. And I'm going, make that connection now. That's what I'm trying to get cinema to do now. Make that connection. Because thankfully, finally, Marvel, Disney, whatever you want to call them, realized, yeah, we have been waiting all our lives for you to take comic books seriously. Look what happens when you do.
Yeah.
So it's, and that was, Kung Fu was a precursor to that. But again, Americans and white people were just, no, no, no. So what happened in Hong Kong was that when they saw that money was in it, anyway, yeah, I'm ahead of myself. Wong Fei Hong novels, stories were created. And Wong Fei Hong was a healer. He ran a place where you would come to get healed, but he also being a Kung Fu guy. So then they decided to make Wong Fei Hong movies as well as Fong Sai-yuk movies. Fong Sai-yuk was the Shaolin hothead. So we had a more yin-like character, which was Wong Fei Hong, and a more yang-like character, who was Fong Sai-yuk. And together, we had the balance, and all the films, and they were making like half a dozen a year. And they got this wonderful guy, Kwan Ta King, who was a Peking opera performer, because prior to movies, the main entertainment was Peking or Beijing opera that was touring all over China and all over Hong Kong all the time. So they sort of did the movie versions of those. Those were very early, and the Kung Fu was very rudimentary. It wasn't until one of the young actors in the Wong Fei Hong movies, who was always playing the villain's henchman, a guy named La Kal Yung, said, we could do better. So slowly, men started taking over the film industry, saying we can make money with this stuff. So then they started getting rid of the women. And so they were having a good time and they were making films. And then another guy named Chang Che showed up, and he got rid of women entirely and created the Yang Gang. And that was all manly men.
Very manly men cutting each other's limbs off.
That's right. And but those were very Peking opera based movies. Peking opera could get very bloody. And, and he loved men and he loved looking at that. And his choreographer was La Kal Yung, partnered up with the amazing, and that was another reason I was so sorry we weren't able to interview them. Tang Chia was La Kal Yung's partner. And between the two of them, the greatest Kung Fu choreographers, the greatest choreographers in cinema history, as far as I'm concerned. And they both went, all right, we're tired of this crap. We're tired. I mean, it's great. Yeah, it's fine. It's working.
Yeah.
It's good for you, Chang, but we're going to do our own thing. And sure enough, La Kal Yung went and became he insisted. He told Mona Fong at Shaw Brothers, I want to do my own movies. Oh no, there's no way you can succeed. And of course, his first movie was $1 million blockbuster. But Tang Chia he didn't want to be a director. It's just like Yun Biao. Jackie Chan wanted to be a director. Sammo Hung wanted to be a director. Yun Biao didn't. He wanted, he's happy to act. He's happy to hang out with his family. And it was the same thing with Tang Chia. He didn't want to be a director. He only directed like 2 or 3 movies. 3 movies, I think. His last one was awesome. But that's because Shaw Brothers begged him to. And that was at the very end of the Shaw Brothers film units. I do go on, don't I? What was the question?
This is great because you actually just answered several of the questions that I had written down. So this is perfect. So regarding One-Armed Swordsman, right, which was Chang Che and came out.
Chang-Che's breakthrough. That's what really made the Yang Gang successful.
And that there were 2 things I thought were really interesting that you mentioned about that movie. The first one is the protagonist is an anti-hero, which ties into me of, you've been talking about how people don't respect these movies and then they're kind of like put in this box and it's like they're not part of this. Because I find that when you talk to people about global cinema, they'll talk about Kurosawa, they'll talk about Bergman, Fellini, but they don't talk about people in Hong Kong. But you know, the 60s, you have Yojimbo, James Bond, like all these anti-heroes, the man with no name. And it seems like the Hong Kong movies are very much a part of everything that's going on, but people won't put them in that box.
Not until much later. If you'll excuse the expression and excuse the ego, not until me.
Okay.
Really not until me. Because everybody ignored him because they figured it was crap for, people who like that kind of stuff. It's interesting. They knew Kurosawa, but they didn't know Kenji Masumi. They didn't even know other guys in Japan. Kenji Masumi was the one who directed Baby Cart in the Land of Demons. He did some of the best Zatoichi movies, some of the best Baby Cart movies, or Lone Wolf and Cub movies. And again, look what's happening now. Anybody watching The Mandalorian?
Yeah.
Do you know what that show is largely based on? Lone Wolf and Cub.
Yeah.
Meets The Man with No Name. And that's the Italian stuff. In other words, they always kind of, let me know if I start breaking up, because
okay,
saying my internet is unstable. But then again, I think it's because I'm unstable.
it's coming out of your brain.
So no, nobody, even the Hong Kong people themselves weren't taking this thing seriously until Jackie Chan, until I was able to create an avenue for which, so Jackie Chan could be accepted in America as Jackie Chan, not as Bruce Lee light. If you remember his first couple of movies in America, Cannonball Run and The Protector, they were trying to make him Bruce Lee or Clint Eastwood.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I want to be me. And we allowed him, with that, Jonathan Ross, and through my intros and my help, allowed him to be him. And then suddenly Rush Hour and other things, and also pop culture, started to be accepted as decent entertainment. Because honestly, most of classic studios in America from the 20s through the 50s, maybe quite to the 70s, pretty much did it all in terms of classic filmmaking. And then finally pop culture started to be embraced. Mm-hmm. And Kung Fu movies are, to my mind, I've said this in the documentary, I've said this in all the books. A great Kung Fu movie is a combination of a really wonderful opera and a wonderful ballet. It's physical action and it's emotional action. That's the opera part, emotional action. And physical action, ballet. And the best Kung Fu is the one that looks easy. I mean, all these guys in La Kaligang movies, 36 Chamber Shaolin, they look like they're floating. But they're doing it from internal power and incredible. Even La Kaligang felt that Bruce was doing too much, hurting himself and hurting other people. He wanted to let soft power the hard and just show you how to do it. But the problem, Will, is that just like the great musicals of Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire, not everyone can do Kung Fu well. Most people can't. That's why America is far more accepting of mixed martial arts. And that's why there is more mixed martial arts in Marvel and DC movie than there is Kung Fu, because Kung Fu, you need someone who knows what they're doing. I mean, who's extremely well trained. And so when Fred Astaire retired, when Gene Kelly retired, there was virtually no one who could reach their level. Same with Sammo, same with Jackie. Bruce, like I said, they're sticking him in the 70s rather than letting him move on. Jet, he's going, I'm a martial art, I'm a Kung Fu student. I am not an actor. I am not a filmmaker. So all these guys are dying out. However, if you know Kung Fu, you can find Kung Fu in certain movies, mostly Disney movies, but they never say it's Kung Fu, and they never identify it. It's always the exceptional thing that a hero does. Some of the greatest Kung Fu movies of the modern age are Doctor Strange and Moana. Of course, the best one of all is the one I worked on, Kung Fu Panda. The Kung Fu in that is, remarkably speaking, extremely accurate. Extremely accurate. That ending, I was at the premiere of Kung Fu Panda in New York, and I sort of seated the audience with all sorts of Qigong and Tai Chi and Kung Fu champions. By the way, how do you know a ninja is not a ninja when they say they're a ninja? How do
I guess I can't tell you I'm a ninja.
Yeah, how do you know a Kung Fu master is not a Kung Fu master when they say they're a Kung Fu master? Call me Qigong, call me Shifu. Ooh. It's the guys who were no, I'm a student. I'm still a student. We're all students. We're all teachers. And so I packed the audience, I dotted the audience with these guys, and they all reacted the same way when certain things happened at the end of that movie. at the end of Kung Fu Panda, when Kung Fu Panda took all the energy that the villain Tai Lung gave him and returned it to him, and then Tai Lung went flying across the room, they reacted. But they reacted even more when Po did this immediately afterwards. He didn't know what he had done. You know, it's like, what was that? They reacted. And then, of course, the big ending, because what happened was that they showed me the rough cut before the premiere. And at the end of, and the fight was great, but they didn't have the last little, and I said, you really got to, and I looked at John Stevenson. There were two directors, Mark Osmond, awesome animator, but he didn't know Kung Fu. John Stevenson, Mark Osmond, John Stevenson. John Stevenson knew Kung Fu extremely well. And so I said, you got to put it in. And Mark is going, we don't have time. And John just goes. And so at the premiere, they put it in. And put it in was at the end when Tai Lung does the last thing to him and he gets him in the Wu Chi finger hold. And Tai Lung goes, did Sifu teach you that? And Po goes, no, I figured it out. Skadoosh. Everybody went, all the Kung Fu guys went crazy at, I figured it out. Because that's what Kung Fu is. You take everything you know, you make it your own, and you go further. In other words, if we taught you Will Fu, you would use it differently than Ric Fu, because Ric Fu, I'm old, I'm heavy, I'm bald, I have a certain attitude, and that's where all my Kung Fu comes from. I'm not trying to do Bruce Lee, I'm trying to do Ric Fu, and that's what you would be doing. So by Po saying, I figured it out, that's what you do. Internal, external, mental, physical, martial, healing, all 6. Use them all and make your life better. Because as Jet Li says, the Kung Fu students' only true opponent is themselves. How many fights do people get in? How many fights do people get in? I said, how long have you been training in martial arts? They go, 10 years. And I said, how many fights have you been in? And and of course, I'm not talking to cops or criminals in this point. Yeah. But, normal people go, 2, how long did those last? Maybe a minute altogether. I said, so you've been training 10 years to prepare yourself for 10 minutes of your life. Kung Fu prepares you for every moment of your life. It's awesome. It's awesome.
So, I guess I have to ask you about Lau Kar-Lung, because you seem to love him so much. And
so much.
Did you meet him or did you know him?
No, I met his 2 brothers.
Okay.
He signed a poster to me. They took 36 Chamber of Shaolin. He signed it. Gordon signed it. And I met at, because Lau Kar-Lung never gave himself an American name or a Western name, an English name. He kept away from all that stuff. He was a Kung Fu man. Just like, me at this point, all we need is Kung Fu, or as Po always says, I love Kung Fu. So he didn't want to get into all that ego stuff. So he kept far away from that stuff for the most part. So I never got to meet him because I was never in a place where he was, but I met his brother, Louis Chia Jung, who was greatly underrated. Another person I was so looking forward to interviewing for the movie. Never got to.
Is he the one who's is he in Legendary Weapons of China?
Yes, he's actually Lau Kar-Lung's brother. Gordon is not actually a brother. He's an adopted brother. Okay. But Lu Chia Jung, I'm not pronouncing it correctly, I'm sorry, people, was the brother he fought at the end of Legendary Weapons of China. And he also was one of Sammo Hung's top cohorts. So you can see him in all sorts of, you can see him in hundreds, if not thousands of movies. And he is super awesome. He's a great guy. And those 2 knew their family form of Kung Fu so extremely well. But they were so versatile by the time they were at their heights that I forgot whether Gordon told me or Jung told me that you could show just a couple of moves of a certain style to Lu, and he would just do it. He would get it. because that's where I figured it out comes from. Because somebody asked me one time, literally on the streets of New York, someone asked me, what's the best style of Kung Fu? And I said, they're all the same. And he went, whoa. I went, yeah, human mind, human body, the world around it. The rest is money and ego. So basically, money and ego. All the styles were developed for families back in the day. And then friends of the family, boyfriends, girlfriends of the family would go, yeah, all that healing stuff is great, but could you show me how you broke that arm again? Yeah. And then it would start getting watered down and would be passed down. And also it became a money thing where people would say, I could sell this and make a lot of money, which is why you hear a lot of teachers, where I heard a lot of martial art teachers at the beginning of my search for Kung Fu. You listen to me only. You come every week for the next 20 years, and we just be started. I'm going. And then when I met the real guys, I met Fong Song Lee in Taiwan and Rick Barrett in Sedona. 20 minutes. 20 minutes, they do miracles. But they got to be willing to give it to you. Yeah. Otherwise, give me money every week. Give me money every week. So yeah, you can understand all techniques on the basis of the human body, the human mind, the world around it. Because, yeah, I could go on again, forefinger, just stick it into energy, baby. It's coming from the skies. It's coming from the ground. It's coming from you. It's all around you. It's inside of you. All you have to do is tap into it. And sometimes all you have to do is believe. Because I know a lot of people who just cut themselves off from it because they didn't know, they don't believe it's possible. And what's great about Rick Barrett and Fong Song Lee is that they showed me in 20 minutes it was possible. They let me accomplish a miracle within 20 minutes. And I sort of go, okay, all right, now I know it's possible.
Yeah.
Again, I've never let anything stop me. It's the same thing with books. I just wanted to write stuff, so I was going to. And people weren't, and I didn't care whether people told me no, because I was doing it for myself. I want to do this stuff for myself. And if they got sold, I mean, I must have written at least 750 pages before anything sold. But I loved it because I learned through those 700. And again, not win or lose, learn or not learn.
Learn or not learn, yeah.
All right, go on. Sorry.
No, this is great.
I love this stuff.
I mean, turning a corner a little bit, but with the Peking opera guys, like with Jackie and Samo, and is what they're doing like proper Kung Fu, or is it like a performance art?
There's no such thing as proper Kung Fu. It's all Kung Fu. It's human achievement.
Because I hear, I don't know as much about this as you do, but a lot of the grumbling that I hear is, Jet Li is real Kung Fu or whatever. Jackie Chan is a performance artist.
Yeah, well, those are grumblers. And as when people say to me, I didn't like your last book, I always go, what's the line I always use? I didn't like your last book. Wait a minute. Wow, I'm blanking on I'm getting old. Blanking on my reply, I go, well, I enjoyed your last book.
It's a great reply. Yeah.
And it's like, I didn't write a book. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like somebody calls me a fifth-rate writer, and I'm going, oh, I'm at least third-rate. I'm at least third-rate. But in any case, what happens with? I mean, this is since 2001 when I met Fong Song Lee, and 2004, I think, when I met Rick Barrett. I've been developing my Kung Fu called Don't Hurt Me. When I teach it, it's called Don't Hurt Yourself.
Okay.
But when I was developing this, at this point, now I'm able to feel energy within myself, outside of myself, and all the rest of it. So the first time you meet Jackie, if you ever meet Jackie or Jet, if you're open to it, you'll feel their energy. I mean, I've been in Chinatown where a waiter will come over to me and just stare. And I'll go, and he goes, and the waiter, I just looked at him, and he went like this, good chi. I'm going, oh, thanks, man.
That's great.
So in any case, it's all Kung Fu because Kung Fu is human achievement. The grumblers are people, I find, my experience is that they have the axes to grind because they're trying to sell their style. And you'll also hear the grumblers always go, my style is the best. My teacher is the best. This style is the best. That style is the best. And my attitude is all the same. Human body, human mind, the world around you. Now, what I loved about Jackie is that he didn't take, once you go into a school, anywhere in the world, you are learning that teacher's stuff. You're not learning necessarily Tai Chi, Qigong, Wing Chun, karate, judo. You're learning that teacher's understanding. You're learning what he's learned from someone else who learned from someone else who learned from something else. So, and in each one of those steps, it gets diluted. I was teaching in the martial arts studies department at the University of Bridgeport, and I was telling them the problem with Kung Fu is that you only need to know really 5% to teach it for the rest of your life. And at that point, you start getting scared because the power is so great. It's so awesome. I don't know any teacher who's been doing it for many, many years who hasn't had to step away for a while, because it's kind of like, that's why my Kung Fu is mind, body, soul, mind, body, spirit, because both of them, all of it have to be in balance. You can get physically incredibly powerful, but if you are not mentally prepared, it will F you up. So everything has to be in balance. That's Tai Chi, the word means balance, yin yang. So Jackie, as soon as I met him, I loved him because everybody else was towing the line of their teacher. Jackie was towing no line. Everyone he worked at, he took something from. Jackie was a performer. Jackie was a filmmaker, just like Bruce. If Bruce had lived, I love Bruce not just because of his movies, but because of his acting, because of his writing, because of his teaching. And if he had lived, man, everything would have been different today. He would not have let himself be frozen in time. He would have just kept going. And he was already well on his way. And me and some of my other science fiction writer friends have a theory that basically he committed unwilling suicide, accidental suicide, because again, the mind and the body, especially at that time of his life, was not in balance. And we know of other Kung Fu teachers who had that little brain thing pop. And that's what happened to him, flooded his brain. Mm-hmm. And they attribute it to a drug he took, but we know that it's also possible simply from mishandling your own internal energy, your own chi. So be that as it may. But anyway, love Jackie because he will, and also, of course, the core of his Kung Fu is not to fight. He wants to avoid fighting. That's what he does in most of his movies. He
runs away, right? Yeah.
Fighting.
Yeah.
Because he knows it's stupid. I mean, somebody does this, it's the stupidest thing you can do. Oh, why hurt yourself? In any case. So I absolutely love Jackie's Kung Fu. I absolutely love all the best of his movies because he revolutionized the Hong Kong action film at least 7 times. Then he got hurt and then everything started changing. And now, of course, China has all Jackie's ever wanted was a father. That's all he's ever wanted. I mean, the father he thought he brought him up wasn't his father. And then he found out the father who brought him up was a terrible man.
Was he a spy? Is that?
Worse than a spy.
Okay. He
was apparently heavily involved in all sorts of interesting trafficking. All the kind of trafficking you can do.
Okay.
So he was going to do a documentary on his search for his real parents. That documentary was never finished because he found his real parents and they were even worse. Oh. So all he's ever wanted was a father, and he kept finding it. Willie Chan was his father. And then the last time I saw him, which was in 2001, Albert Jung, who was a big triad, was his father. Now guess who his father is?
Is it China?
It's China.
Yeah.
He's got the best father ever. And I also laugh in that people, all the Hong Kong people understandably are condemning him for his stand with China. But I always say, go watch Project A Part 2 again. At one point in that movie, Jackie's character gives a little speech to the revolutionaries in that movie. almost word for word exactly the same thing he said that Hong Kong hates him for. But
Yeah.
it's a different time, and movies are one thing, reality is another. But in any case, love Jackie. Sammo has his own issues. I love Sammo's. Sammo is again the yang to Jackie's yin. You can always tell a Jackie Chan movie that Sammo directed because he has Sammo kill somebody. I mean, he has Jackie kill somebody. Jackie, and he also has Jackie make fists and fight.
Yeah.
Jackie's own movies, no fighting, avoid the fights, let them hurt themselves. So in any case,
So
yeah.
speaking of Jackie, just wanted to ask you about, because a lot of people, I think Police Story and Project A are the two of the movies I hear about the most from people who I talk to. Yeah.
Those were his best, really were.
But it seems like people understand how good they are as movies, but maybe they don't understand how important they were in the context in which they were released. Like how revolutionary were those movies? Like when he put them out.
It's the same. I mean, Jackie will always be, when he started, what was his name? Chen Lung. I think his Chinese name was Chen Lung, Jackie Chan. And that meant little dragon. And that meant basically son of dragon, who was Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee was dragon. So Jackie will always be in Bruce's shadow. Now, Bruce revolutionized Hong Kong cinema, because prior to Bruce, everybody was doing Peking opera stuff and endless fighting and fists and very rudimentary kind of crap. Even the Wong Fei-hung movies was pretty rudimentary. It wasn't until, and what people were reacting to, both I believe in Bruce's movies and in John Woo's movie A Better Tomorrow, was the energy that was coming off the screen. Because up until then, the energy was very contained and very staid. And John and Bruce broke it out, and so did Jackie. In other words, Jackie did his version of what Bruce did, which was everybody was doing Bruce, and even Jackie was forced to do Bruce for a while when he was cast in New Fist of Fury,
right, yeah.
playing the Bruce Lee character. And that was what shaped his attitude going, again, I don't want to be Bruce. I don't want to be Clint Eastwood. I want to be me. And in those movies, specifically in pretty much, he was doing, 8 movies in 2 years for Lo Wai.
Yeah.
And that led up to Fearless Hyena. That was one of the last ones on that contract, where he and Yuen Woo Ping, the director and co-choreographer, got the formula right for the kind of kung fu comedy. You could see it in some of the earlier Lo Wei Jackie Chan movies, like a fist. What was that called? Not a fistful of talents. Half a Loaf of Kung Fu.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where Jackie does the satire of other characters, including Zatoichi, in the opening credits. So you can see him during those movies slowly developing himself, his screen persona. But Fearless Hyena, boom, and then Snake in the Eagle's Shadow, which was the precursor of Drunken Master. Snake in the Eagle's Shadow, boom, he was fully formed, and everybody went,
Yeah.
They just sort of went, cartoon come to life, comic book come to life. He was doing all his own stunts. He was Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly, Buster Keaton. He was all of those guys, but he was also uniquely him, and he was doing it. He wasn't using special effects. He wasn't using stuntmen. He was showing off and doing astonishing things. And again, for people who were closed off to their own chi, they were just kind of like, wow, this is super fun. But people who were even aware of what's going on in their own minds were reacting to this wave after wave after wave of cathartic, exhilarating energy. And then Drunken Master solidified it. After that, he was wandering for a while, figuring out what he was going to do next. Dragon Lord, and a Dragon Lord, had that one shot of the Bun Pyramid that took 2,900 takes.
I remember reading that. Yeah, the most takes ever. Was that correct?
Yeah, it's in the Guinness Book of World Records. But that was Jackie floundering around, not knowing where to go. Because after that, he did, Young Master, which was his last statement in Kung Fu comedy, because he put in everything and the kitchen sink. But it wasn't until he found something he could improve upon which was drunk for Wong Fei Hong. He can do his Wong Fei Hong, which was Drunken Master.
Mhm.
Then he said, up until Police Story, there had never been a modern day Kung Fu movie. And he just opened up everything with Police Story. And then Project A, the way I termed it, is he dragged the Kung Fu movie, kicking and screaming, into the 20th century. There's a reason that movie takes place. I believe it takes place in 1901.
Mhm.
There's a reason it does. And so he, again, just went crazy. He had a focus. He knew what he wanted to do, and he did it. And again, for the Hong Kong people who had seen, because when Hong Kong has the success, they will just copy it,
Just do it over and over and over
endless,
again. Yeah.
endless copies. We're still having Bruceploitation movies. One of the great things, you know how great Jackie Chan is? I'll tell you how great Jackie Chan is. Virtually no one can copy him.
Yeah.
You know, a couple of people tried, didn't really work, because Jackie is Gene Kelly. Jackie is Fred Astaire. There's no replicating him. There's no copying him. He's too good. Even he can't copy him.
Yeah. It's become one of his issues, right? I guess.
Well, he's
So I
fine.
mean,
He's got his dad now. He's fine.
I don't want to take up any more of your time.
No, please do.
Do you take up more of your time? Okay.
Okay. I got nothing to do.
So Jackie, I mean, one of the things I find really interesting about Jackie is that he seems really nice, and his public persona is like very goofy. But I feel like in order to achieve what he's achieved, you have to be kind of intense. Is there intensity to him?
Oh my God, yes. Here's the deal. I do my impersonation of Jackie. This is Jackie in public. This is Jackie in private. He's very, yeah. He's had two families, both of whom I don't even know the word for what they did to him. He is very, and he was unable to break the cycle of abandonment, which is something that he carries with him. He had the opportunity with his own son, and he missed it by 12 years. He only became aware of what he should have done or could have done to put his own heart at rest, and he missed it by 12 years. So now he can't stop. Do you ever wonder why he's said many times that I would like to die on a movie set.
I've seen that, yeah.
And now the meaning of that has taken more dimension and depth, because now he can't stop. If he stops, he has to look inside himself, and inside himself is one of the most tortured, lost, crying little children you could possibly meet. So in public, and that's the other thing about him, he was known as Double Boy when he was starting. He would try extra hard on everything. But that's because because his family wouldn't love him. He's trying to get everybody to love him. And he does.
Yeah.
And as soon as he does, he moves on to the next one. Doesn't have to get me to love him anymore. I already love him. And he still remembers me, and it's awesome every time I see him. There's that spark, because he knows everything I did for him and tried to do for him. And he knows that I did it not for my own reward, but because I admired him so much. So it's great. But he doesn't need to seek me out. He needs to move on. He has to keep moving on.
And is that have you been like on set with him, or have you seen?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So is he intense when he's making movies, or is he?
No,
like,
he's among his gang. He has his whole group, and he's among other people. It's only when he's alone or with select people that he will grow quiet, when he feels safe. But on the set, got to keep that energy going, man. Got to keep that energy going. I mean, I was there for a week or two on Miracle, or Mr. Cantata Lady Rose.
Yeah.
I even worked on the Medallion. I got out of that before I would have been whining about that had I not left very early in that production. And and there's a couple of other places, and I've seen him. I've been to a variety of his offices. I've been to a variety of his premieres. Uh, I loved it. After we had the American premiere of Operation Condor, I see him later at the party and he goes, "Movie guy, what did they do to them? What did they do to my movie?" And I went, "You're asking me? Your movie." Yeah, he's an awesome guy, but he had, I do not, he makes me feel better about my childhood. Let me put it that way.
I saw someone describe Operation Condor as his Apocalypse Now. Is that?
Oh yeah, that was super rough. Everything that could go wrong with that movie did go wrong. I mean, I'm very good friends with Vincent Lin, who fights him in that movie, and who also broke his skull on that movie. Not Jackie Chan. Vincent broke his
He broke his own skull. Yeah.
Yeah, and he told me moment to moment that just the incredible, what a fuster-cluck that was.
It's a good way to put it. I guess the one other question that comes to mind for me here is, when you talk so much about when you have people like Jackie Chan or Jet Li, you can't imitate what they do. With someone like John Woo, you can imitate it because it's filmmaking technique, and I feel like, but you can't become him, but you can try to do what he's doing.
Yeah, you definitely can try.
Yeah.
And so far, everyone's done it wrong.
But I feel like
they're not doing the yin yang. They're doing yin. Oh yeah, they're not doing yin yang. I love this. I've been talking about this a lot lately for these films, which is John Woo did the Gun Fu movies with Chow Yun-fat. Americans were just love that movie. So they hire Chow Yun-fat and they make The Replacement Killers. And so what you see from the very moment Chow Yun-fat appears on screen, you can see the lack of understanding. They got all the style, they got none of the substance. They don't know anything that's going behind the way people. That's why I call, that kind of fighting empty movement. I was on a panel at the Urban Action Showcase just the other day, and I was saying, if you could take a fight out of a movie without affecting the movie in any way, not a good fight. And basically, Americans, Western, English-speaking filmmakers make action scenes to fill time or to even waste time. They don't make them to communicate character, communicate story, communicate mood, communicate anything. Empty movement.
It's just spectacle, right?
Mixed up martial arts. Yeah, pretty movement.
Yeah.
I mean, the best of the ones don't do that. I'm very excited with the new season of The Mandalorian, because they've had fights in the first 2 episodes so far. And they've got substance. They communicate the Mandalorian's character. I mean, Jon Favreau is just, I admire him so much because he knows he has a faceless, expressionless character. So they have to communicate character and how he moves and what he does. And they're doing that even more in the second season now. And I'm going, yeah, man.
That's great.
So yeah, they can copy the style of John Woo, but they don't understand what the content is. John Woo made Kung Fu movies and also wuxia movies before he made Gun Fu movies. So what he did was replace the sword with the gun. And he understood that the gun was a part of the fighter's body, not just something. Most people in America, of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, Sylvester Stallone movies, they're pulling the trigger of those guns like it's the easiest thing in the world. It's the easiest thing ever to shoot a gun and to kill somebody. Simple. Let's just mow down dozens of people with no recrimination, no reverberation, nothing. You watch the John Woo movies and understand that every time John Woo pulls that trigger, he's communicating power and pain and fear. Because have you ever shot? I wrote the Dirty Harry novels, so I've shot for a period of time. I've shot every gun that it was possible to shoot, so I know what it feels like to shoot a gun. It's not easy, literally and figuratively. It's not easy. If there's a reason, it's a dumb reason, but there's a reason that you have never seen or rarely see, I think maybe one or two movies ever did this. When you fire an automatic weapon, the shell is ejected. And that shell is hot. And if you got a soldier or a cop next to you, it will hit that person. And that person will react and go, ow.
Yeah.
Now, to me, that is a great way to communicate the power of a weapon and also the reality of a weapon. That's another reason why there are so many car crashes in movies, and you never see, except I think maybe in American Werewolf in London, have you ever seen what actually happens in a car crash?
Oh yeah, it's totally inaccurate as to, yeah, it's, I mean, I feel like that about movies in general, is that the experiences are very often clearly not experiences that the people who made the movie have lived, and so they don't understand what it means.
But the superhero movies, especially the Marvel ones, are able to jump that particular ship. Superheroes are an awesome way around that problem. So in any case, so yeah, you can copy style all you want, but you won't get it right, and it won't be successful as the thing you saw until you understand what you saw and incorporate it and put in vulnerability and put in intelligence and put in the rest of it. That's all I want. Thankfully, Marvel and Disney, but that's also why I consult mostly. No, I haven't consulted on any live action film. They don't want my advice.
Okay.
Animation wants my advice because we have total control of our actors there.
Oh yeah, that's something I didn't even think about. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, because that's the other great thing about animation, because you don't have to train somebody like Jackie Chan for 40 years to do it right. You can just understand what they're doing, and then you animate it so it's done right. That's why Poe was such a great kung fu guy. And hopefully the minions will be too.
I wonder, is animation more like, is it like more like writing a novel where you just control the whole thing and there's not as many variables that you can't put your finger on?
It is it's a fascinating situation. It's a huge gang of people who work on animated movies, and everybody contributes to the final. If you watch the documentaries on Disney Plus on the making of Frozen 2, you can see just how complex it gets and how much. There's an army of animators, and both from animation and special effects. There's an army of story people. There's an army of character people. And that's why more and more movies now, animated movies, are being directed by a team, not an individual. There's just too much going on. And yeah, you got to control everything. That's why it takes 4 years. However, again, we've made this astonishing leap. Jon Favreau, with, people say, oh, the live action Lion King is terrible. I'm saying, that movie wasn't made for you to enjoy. That movie was made so they could figure out how to do it technically. And then he was able to take what he learned on The Lion King and turn it to The Mandalorian. And now you can do a whole new season of The Mandalorian, basically a 10-hour movie in less than a year, while an animated movie is 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Jon Favreau is the brain on that. He's the one who's writing it. He's the one who's controlling it. They've got that astonishing studio. And that's just the universe in one building. I mean, watch any episode of that and understand it's all done in one room.
It's just insane. I met Jon Favreau once, and he had this very interesting, like, intuitive way of speaking that didn't strike me as like the typical kind of Hollywood, like, we can use these metrics, and he spoke very much like an artist.
Yeah, he loves what he does, and he does it for himself. He's not doing it for you. He's not doing it for the producers. He's doing it for himself. And that's just like the Bugs Bunny cartoon guys. They made those for themselves. They made those to entertain themselves. But thankfully, Jon Favreau has great taste and great imagination and intelligence.
Yeah.
So for him to make something for himself, it hits a pretty high bar.
It's interesting that I'm sorry if I'm rambling here, but it's interesting you mentioned the.
We're rambling.
Well, the people want to hear what you have to say, I feel
Not
like.
necessarily. Reactions.
Jon Favreau kind of made The Lion King to figure out how to make that type of movie. I read that Ang Lee with Gemini Man basically did that I haven't seen that movie, but I've read this really interesting interview with him about how he was trying to work out the technology of the movie more than make the movie.
I got to meet Ong Lee.
Okay.
Me and Jeff Yang were about to do the audio commentary for the DVD of Drunken Master. And the studio was booked just before we did our audio commentary. Ong Lee did the commentary for Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Oh, wow.
So I got to meet him. He signed a poster to me, and it was super awesome. So I love Ong Lee. John Woo should have directed Gemini Man. Ong Lee should not have directed. It is far from a good movie.
Now I really want to see it.
Oh my God, I was so disappointed. It was, what the F are you? I mean, I do a podcast, the Action Film Autopsy, and go back and listen to my, if you could stand, again, me prattling and also forgetting names. And I'm really, as soon as the mic goes on, as soon as I start recording, every single word leaves my brain.
Well, I wrote like 8 pages of notes before doing this interview, and I've asked like 2 questions from my notes. All the rest has been.
Well, you can make this a 15-part series if you'd like. I don't know. But keep that as Gemini Man was a very disappointing, very sad, very stupid movie.
But I mean, Crouching Tiger is such an incredible film.
Yeah, and that, again, the key to that movie was that there had been thousands, probably literally thousands of wuxia movies before Crouching Tiger. But Crouching Tiger did something none of them did, which is it connected the flying swordsman to their emotions. In the wuxia movies, basically people accepted that these guys could fly. Okay, fine, they're floating. Because also the Chinese understand qi a little bit more than Western. Mm-hmm. However, because as you can see, if you've seen the live action Mulan, you can see that Westerners don't understand qi at all. So in any case, what Ong Lee did was, the way I phrased it, and he sort of nodded for this, which was all the characters in Crouching Tiger, all the flying swordsman characters, their bodies were doing what their hearts could not. The reason they could fly is that their hearts were in what I call the glass prison, the glass cage. So everything else flew, their souls didn't fly. And he communicated in that movie, which was, I think, the reason that it was made hundreds of millions of dollars and won 4 Oscars. Because all he had to do was connect what they could do to how they felt. And that's what the great guys at Marvel are doing now. Whenever you see a character fighting in character, they know what they're doing. Again, Doctor Strange, best kung fu movie from the Marvel thing, because through the whole movie, best Jackie Chan kung fu movie, Doctor Strange. The whole movie, Doctor Strange going is, there's got to be a better way of doing this. Everybody else is doing martial arts mysticism. At the end, Doctor Strange goes, I'm going to do kung fu mysticism. And that's the difference, because everybody else is fighting. And Doctor Strange is going, there's got to be a better way. And he finds the better way. Dormammu, I'm coming to make a deal.
Is Tony Leung going to be in the second one of those?
Apparently, yeah. No, excuse me. Tony Leung, I think, is going to be in Shang-Chi.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I remember reading that he was going to be in a Marvel movie, but I couldn't.
Yeah, he's going to be in Shang-Chi. And I'm praying that Shang-Chi is good. I was very lucky. I was invited to do a lecture at the Disney Studios in 2017, and they recorded it for posterity. And the lecture was called Kung Fu and the Art of Screen Action. And again, I said, show this to Marvel, show this to Mulan. And I think they did show it to Mulan, or somebody from Mulan showed it, but of course they didn't call me up. They didn't ask me to explain or elaborate. And the result is what you see in the live action Mulan, which is like, oh dear. And hopefully Shang-Chi won't be oh dear, because it's Marvel, and Marvel works very hard to do a good job.
It seems like there just seem to be so many missed opportunities of, like, Crouching Tiger was a hit, and then Hero was a hit, and you have all these doors that open and then close right away.
There's a editorial I wrote on the Daily Grindhouse website, which I think is still available. It's called A History of Disrespect, the Weinsteins and Hong Kong cinema. Yeah, Hero was a hit against the will of its distributors. The Weinsteins were responsible for crippling Hong Kong cinema in America in a very aggressive way. And in this in this editorial, I went into detail on the things they had done. They tried to buy up every Hong Kong movie for American distribution, and they shelved them. Whatever movies that Quentin Tarantino, who they wanted to play nice with because he was one of their most successful filmmakers, whatever movie Quentin told them they have to release, because you'll notice the Hero says Quentin Tarantino presents. They tried to cripple or hobble or hurt in some way. In Hero, they put a samurai sword in Jet Li's hand on the cover. They delayed the release of that movie at least 6 times. Shaolin Soccer, same thing. Shaolin Soccer was a huge hit at the time of that year's World Cup. They delayed it from the World Cup. They delayed that 6 times. They edited it. They changed all sorts of things. In Drunken Master 2, which they released, they changed the most important line in the entire movie. They changed the music. They changed the sound effects because we're improving it. No, you are purposely handicapping it and crippling it for whatever reasons. I don't know if you were scared by a Chinese person when you were kids, but because I asked Mr. Weinstein directly to his face why he was doing this. And he said, "Oh, I'm improving them. I'm making them acceptable to an American audience."
So it's such an arrogant thing to say.
Well, hey, hello.
I know he's not a good person, but
yeah,
well, far from.
The reason that Crouching Tiger was never, there was no sequel except Harvey Weinstein made the sequel for Netflix, and that was a piece of crap too.
That movie was horrible.
Of course it was.
Ooh.
Because he purposely, for whatever reason, he purposely does this stuff because he wanted to cripple. Now, after talking with a lot of the people in the film business, the only conclusion I could come to is that a lot of bad producers have a hate on for anything. That's why minorities and women were held down for so long, because these producers found it a point of pride to hurt somebody, to hold people back. It made them feel powerful. So finally, again, Marvel with Black Panther and hopefully with other things, and Black Widow will hopefully break that cycle and make all this money that these bad producers can't ignore. But apparently Weinstein's and other producers who had this, I was friends with a wonderful author, Sue Grafton, who used to be a screenwriter and then became a best-selling mystery writer.
Right.
And I said, "Why don't you make your character into a movie character?" She goes, "I don't like the way they play," which was talking about movie producers, because they play these games. They play these games of destroying people's dreams and holding people back. So they decided that, all right, we're going to save our choreographers. We're going to save the glorious history of the roundhouse punch. And we're not going to put our fight coordinators out of business by embracing the Hong Kong style of action, because that'll put certain of our friends out of business. So we will conspire to hamper, cripple, handicap any way we can these movies, so people forget about them. Also, they could also use the excuse as, if we teach people actually how to fight well, kids will be hurting other kids. And that's one of the reasons I like Taekwondo, because no matter how good you are in it, it's very difficult to hurt yourself and other people with it.
Yeah.
Very difficult. So there's all sorts of bad reasons, but be that as it may, they did it anyway. They crippled these movies anyway.
It's interesting to me that you get so many instances of, like in your book, you talk about how when Jackie was hired, they tried, like stunt coordinators tried to show him how to fight. And I remember reading that when John Woo got hired to do Hard Target, they had Sam Raimi on the set in case John Woo messed up, which is ludicrous to me, because if you've seen Hard Boiled, in what world can Sam Raimi make that movie? But
I disagree with that. I love Sam.
I don't dislike Sam Raimi. I feel like he's so different as a filmmaker.
Yes and no. Look at Sam Raimi's history. Sam Raimi, was punished for years after The Evil Dead. For years, producers punished him, used him as a whipping boy. You look at his career, and he makes these wonderful movies, and for some reason, producers can smell some insecurity on him, and they go after him, and they cripple him. I mean, what he did after Evil Dead, what was that movie that went through several titles that was disemboweled in the editing room? I forgot.
It's not, I'm thinking of Drag Me to Hell. It's not that one, is it? It's
No,
something else.
that was I was disappointed with that for another reason, but not because of he's an awesome kinetic filmmaker, but he has been so beaten down. I mean, again, Spider-Man 1 and 2, then Spider-Man 3.
Yeah.
It's like he could do it when he is not being mentally crippled, when he is not being hobbled somehow. He has that energy. But again, he was punished, and I don't know what his issue is. I don't know Sam very well. My best friend knows Sam pretty well, but I've never really been able to talk to him for a long time, because I would be finding out, what's the problem, man? How can they get you? Because guys like Robert Rodriguez and Spike Lee and Quentin Tarantino, they don't need anybody to kiss their ass. They're going to do what they want to do, period. Sam, for some reason, needed a studio to pat him on the head. For some reason. I feel that he could have gone the same route, the independent route, as those guys, and made what he wanted. Doesn't take a lot of money, but these guys are protecting their jobs.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I got off track by talking about Sam Raimi.
Oh yes, and by the way, they didn't have Sam Raimi on the set in case John Woo was it John Woo?
Yeah, John Woo. Yeah.
No, in case he did wrong, they didn't do that. They did that to intimidate him, saying you could be replaced.
Oh, of course, mind games, right? Yeah,
they would, because they wouldn't choose Sam Raimi to do it. They're just using Sam Raimi because they can. I mean, when I was on Superman, Richard Lester showed up, who I love.
Of The Hard Day's Night, didn't he do the Beatles movie? Yeah.
Yeah, because he also did the 3 and 4 Musketeers, which is a great action film for the same producers. So he was there to try to control Richard Donner, because Richard Donner was fighting the producers. So again, they brought him in as a threat, and then of course they used Richard to disembowel Superman 2.
Did you this just completely just popped into my head out of the blue, but did you meet Marlon Brando on Superman? No.
I was only on set. I was on set for a month, but I was only there during the Grand Central Station set Lex Luthor scenes.
Okay.
So they filmed all of those, every single scene that took place in that the Grand Central, under Grand Central, throughout the entire movie were filmed during that month. And I was there for that entire month. So Gene Hackman, Christopher Reeve, Margot Kidder, all the rest, not Ned Beatty, Peter Boyle.
Peter Boyle, right? Yeah.
Yeah. All those guys I met, but Marlon was only on the very beginning of production for what, a week, 3 weeks?
I would imagine. No one, I mean, from all the stories I've read about him, I imagine he wasn't there very long.
Yeah, and he did not show up at the premiere, I can assure you that.
It's interesting that you met Richard Donner, and then he goes on to do, well, you were there on the set, and then he makes Lethal Weapon 4.
Yeah, and I talked to him about that too. Hold on, I'm going to show you something.
Oh man, that's so cool.
Look at that stationery, man. The embossed Superman symbol.
That's awesome.
Signed by Richard Donner, sent to me on September 29th, 1977. They were still signed by him. And also, do you see in the background on the stationery, you can see the S embossed at the bottom. But
yeah.
Had I only known that stationery existed, I would have stolen
a stack of it, right?
I would have stolen all of it. So
that's amazing.
So quickly, tell you what.
Yeah.
Unless you want to do this in multiple parts or come back on another day, you say you have a list of questions. Let us do rapid fire. How many questions you got?
Well, let me see. Because a lot of them are in this convoluted kind of style I wrote, and I honestly think that we've probably covered the subject matter of most of them, but not the, so it's, I guess the one section I have on here that we didn't talk too much about was the history of women in, Angela Mao, and then onward from. But
Again, women did everything at the start, and then men pushed them out. Because, there's a reason that most movies are more violent than they are sexy, because violence makes these bad producers feel powerful in a strong way, while sex makes them feel weak, vulnerable. Love makes them feel vulnerable, because a woman can have power over them just by the way she looks and whether she's willing to be intimate with them. And that makes them crying lost little kids. They don't like that. They want to be macho men. So women are all, when men can muscle out women, they do. And they did in the Hong Kong history. And it's just like, that's true of American cinema. If you go back at the beginning of American cinema, the silent days, women were doing a lot. And then eventually men pushed them out. And then for years they said women couldn't open an action movie. The story of what happened with Alien 3 is absolutely fascinating. And that Thelma and Louise comes out as a huge hit, and these producers band together to cripple every movie they can that stars a female. And that also happened more recently with Wonder Woman. And then you look at the movies that come out starring women following Wonder Woman, Red Sparrow, Tomb Raider. I mean, these are just fusterclucks of the highest order. And I believe it is purposeful on the part of the filmmakers. I mean, they're always telling the actors, oh, we're making your character accessible. But if you look at the first 20 to 40 minutes of the new Tomb Raider, that is a textbook example of getting an audience to hate your leading character. They show her to be an idiot for the first half hour of that movie.
Yeah.
Oh, we're making her accessible. No.
Anyway. And is that when you have these stars like Moon Lee and Yukari Oshima and stuff, and they get relegated to these? I mean, I really like those movies, but they're obviously not. They're not big budget movies. There's not a lot of resources there. Are they doing that on purpose?
Yeah, of course. They're denigrating it. Everybody has to denigrate it in some way, bring it down to their level. One of my favorite stories, I'm at a party celebrating Michelle Yeoh in New York, the day before she reports to the set of Tomorrow Never Dies. And we're talking, I have pictures of us together, all this stuff. It's a lot of fun. I've known her for a while, and I met her first in Hong Kong and interviewed her a bunch of times. She gets a phone call, and she has to take the call. But I stay nearby because I don't drink. And I hear her on the phone going, well, why hire me if they don't want to use me? And then later on Entertainment Tonight, they have a tour of the James Bond Tomorrow Never Dies party set led by Terry Hatcher. And there's Michelle Yeoh behind her. And Terry Hatcher completely ignores her, doesn't introduce her, pretend she doesn't exist. Then, also Entertainment Tonight, they're on the line at the premiere, and they're interviewing Pierce Brosnan. And they say, do you have anything, something along these lines, do you have anything to say to your co-star? And he says, well, to Terry Hatcher, I would suggest that she treat people better because she'll meet them on the way down. And that's not exactly what he said. And the reason I can't tell you exactly what he said, because you can no longer find that interview.
Oh, wow.
I saw it live on Entertainment Tonight. Not only can you not find that interview, you can't find the t-shirts that the crew made. The crew made t-shirts that said, I survived Tomorrow Never Dies.
Jeez.
And the reason they survived it, and again, I've talked to Barbara Broccoli, the co-producer of the James Bond
producer, right? Yeah.
About this, and I will tell you her reaction. Her reaction to it was this. She didn't say a word, but she didn't say it wasn't true.
Okay.
But she didn't agree with it. She did not say a word. And what happened, to my understanding, because after Superman, I had a whole group of people who were in the crew who I was able to say hello to. San Diego Comic-Con and all these other things. And we would just shoot the breeze. And whenever I would see a movie mystery, I would go, why did, in other words, why did Pixar's Brave turn out the way it did?
Yeah.
Why did The Good Dinosaur turn out the way it did? So I'm always asking, why did Tomorrow Never Dies turn out the way it did? From what I was told, in the original script for Tomorrow Never Lies, which was the original title of Tomorrow Never Dies, Terry Hatcher's Paris Carver was the Bond girl. She went through the entire movie, and she was the one in James's arms at the end. In fact, if you remember, what was The World Is Not Enough? And it was Christmas Jones.
Christmas, yep.
And they had that line, Christmas only comes once a year.
Yep.
At the end of Tomorrow Never Dies, they had, I'll always have Paris. They had the line. But apparently, Terry Hatcher behaved so abominably on the set that they did the unthinkable and the undoable, which was they fired her. They had to write a special death scene for her. They had to hire an actor, because you'll remember, in that death scene, there are only 3 characters. James, this assassin who appears at the beginning of the scene and dies at the end of the scene and never appears again, and the corpse of Terry Hatcher, who I can tell you was a stunt person who they grafted Terry Hatcher's face on digitally. And then for the rest of the movie, which was already in production, they had to rewrite it and refilm it on the fly with Michelle Yeoh as the Bond girl, as the leading character. And it was a nightmare, but I thought it turned out remarkably well, considering.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge James Bond fan, and I mean, again,
Me too.
I think I was 14 when that movie came out, so I wasn't thinking critically about it that much.
The very first adult movie I ever saw was Dr. No.
Oh wow, really?
Matinees, yeah.
That's great.
So I adore James Bond. In fact, the book you should, if you don't have already, is.
Oh man, I don't have that one.
Nobody does it better. It's the oral history. I'm quoted throughout.
Okay.
The author, Edward Gross, I'm basically the action expert. I discuss the action in every single James Bond. It's a wonderful book. It's an amazing book. And you'll also notice the stuff they skip over in the Tomorrow Never Dies.
Interesting.
Yeah. They didn't quote me on that one.
Well, I mean, I can't thank you enough for your time today and for all this amazing.
Obviously, you can tell I love it.
Yeah, this is great. And I'm very glad to have met you and had this conversation with you. So,
more of an interrupted monologue, I have to admit.
I mean, honestly, that's a lot better for me, because I really dislike interviews where the interviewer just goes and goes and goes. It's like, are you interviewing this person because you want to hear what they have to say? So I'm glad that you talk so much. Do you have any parting wisdom for us before we sign off? No?
Stay strong, smart, serene, sympathetic, sane, and safe.
That's great. All right. Well, Ric Meyers, thank you so much. And we'll see you on the flip side.